How has Google's latest Hummingbird update affected your brand online? That's what we're going to be discussing here this morning with myself, Barry Moran, the Digital Strategy Director for Foundry Healthcare, and with Julie Nelson, Research and Planning Director. What we want to talk to you about is Hummingbird and what is it, how has it affected your SEO, the impact on your content strategy, and where you should consider going from here. There are a number of challenges that digital marketing represents, especially within pharma. There are a number of specific rules and regulations that the pharma industry has to adhere to. I'm not just talking to a single audience. There are the patients, there are carers, GPs, doctors, nurses, pharmacists, etc. You have to understand the context of the message that you're trying to deliver and how that message will resonate with the users, obviously within the rules and regulations. So, Hummingbird. Hummingbird is the latest announced update from Google. There are a number of updates to the algorithms throughout the year. Last year there was in excess of 500. Normally 2 updates a day that no one in the industry notices. And then there are a number of announced updates. Hummingbird is the latest, and it's the biggest update that we've had since caffeine back in 2010. Primarily it's a core quality change, and it doesn't impact SEO that much if you're doing the right things. And that's the key question. Are you doing the right things? Hummingbird is focused more on ranking information. It's based on more an intelligent understanding of search requests, and unlike its predecessor Caffeine, which was targeted at better indexing of websites, Google wants to parse at the query level, this better intelligent understanding, conceptualization of the search itself on the query and not the pages. The Hummingbird's objective is not a newer optimization of the indexation process, but to better understand the user's intent when searching, thereby offering the most relevant results first, dependent on the device that people are searching from. An additional element is where Google is moving in the understanding and the recognition of those devices and those platforms. People are not just searching in a desktop environment. Mobile search is a significant proportion of the majority of websites and traffic out there, and is continuing to increase. Both in the mobile and in the desktop environment, we have conversational search. The ability to do queries over a session, so not just a single query, and how the original query impacts on the subsequent queries. So for example, what can cause swollen wrists could be followed up by what are the treatment options. The what are the treatment options query directly relates to the original query of what can cause swollen wrists. Previously, those would have been treated as 2 completely independent queries and would have returned quite significant results within the search. You may or may not recognise the lovely man smiling at you there. This is Matt Cutts. Matt recently made a keynote at PubCon, and Matt was talking about conversational search, and he used the query, what is the weather like? Now, because Google recognises who he is and where he was logged in, they knew the location that he was looking for and the weather report that he was looking for. Will it rain tomorrow? They knew that that query was still in the exact same location. What about Mountain View? So he's changed his location, but Google's conversational search algorithms understand that he was still relating to the pre-queries. What's the weather like? Will it be raining? And is it in that location? So Google's getting a lot smarter about how it interprets the query and how it relates that to the previous queries. How Hummingbird friendly are you? Well, In reality, you should be really hummingbird friendly because there's nothing that you should have been doing wrong in the first place. If you were taking shortcuts, if you were trying to game the game, then you may be in a position where you need to seriously consider your digital marketing strategies and how they relate to search now and going into 2014 and beyond. When creating and optimizing your site, you have to do it with a clear audience in mind. You have to know who you want to speak to and how you want to speak to that person. What type of language are they using? What type of queries are they using? Are there semantic variants that are relevant in one part of your audience but not in another part of your audience? And traditionally, pharma communicated with just prescribers and payers. But now you need to consider the wider audience in a wider digital context. This can be tricky to get the direct information to the direct end user, but if you understand the audience and how they engage and you ask the right questions, then you can start to create the right content that will resonate with that end user. Hummingbird friendly SEO is where SEO has always been. You have to understand that you have a clear information architecture on your site. You have to understand the use of canonical tags and redirects and how that can impact on change on your site. Obviously, all your content on your site has to be relevant. It has to serve a purpose. It has to be there for a reason. One of the previous updates was an update known as Panda. And Panda predominantly tackled sites which had thin or duplicate content or were cluttered with adverts. The content needs to serve a purpose and a reason. There is no magic formula. There are variant types of content, whether that's short form content or long form content, but there is no magic number. There is no 250 words on a page and use your keyword X times. Again, that was trying to game. You have to understand the right content for the right audience. It has to be topical, and it has to be relevant, and it has to be quality. But quality is a subjective term. Quality to one audience is very different to another audience. So again, it comes back to your research and your planning stage. Understand what content is going to work with your audience. By audience engagement with that content and that content delivering the right experience, that content is deemed to be quality. Some of the elements that you can use to help to create structure around that content so that the search engines can engage with that content better are schema and the open graph tags and semantic markups. In Google's Webmaster Tools, something that you all have free access to and something that you should be utilizing alongside your Google Analytics, Google have actually made it very easy for you now to mark up certain parts of a page. You don't have to be a programmer or a coder in order to mark up elements of a page to allow the search engines to understand that page, prioritize elements on that page a lot more clearly. So for example, if you have any times, dates, if you have any quotes, if you have any images, it is very easy to go in and to mark up those elements of the page, and when the search engines crawl, when the spiders crawl your website, your web pages, they understand the elements that are reported on that page. Content is critical. We've heard the phrase over the years that content is king. Content is critical to your website, to your content marketing strategy, to where you will be visible now and how you will be visible going forward. The content that you develop, again, goes back to your research and planning and is relevant to your audience, your target audience, and how you want to communicate. The type of content that you create for your mobile device rendering, for your app, or indeed for your desktop will have significant variances throughout. And indeed, recently Google has announced that it will be crawling and indexing all apps that are on the Android platform. They're not quite there with the iOS platform yet. But if you devise a mobile app that is for Android, the content will be crawled and can be indexed and can be returned within mobile searches from Google in the very near future. You need to create this quality content as an experience, the right experience online. It's the right audience, the right time, the right place, the right content. One of the issues with creating content is that most people produce a piece of content, they publish it, and they expect it to have this effect. It takes off and starts to deliver lots of traffic. Indeed, they expect that many people are going to like that content just because they've produced it. When in actual fact, the majority of content that is created, either within the pharmaceutical industry or in any industry and any vertical out there, doesn't have the impact that we all think that it's going to have. There are significant peaks and troughs and spikes when content is first produced. It dies off, it then can come back, and it dies off again. And one of the main reasons for this is that, unfortunately, the majority of content that's produced is not very good. It doesn't have the research and the planning element. It doesn't understand what's going to work with the audience. Someone has a bright idea for a piece of content. It's then created, produced, published, and not promoted. And that's one of the key aspects, that it has to be promoted. In 2013, 2014 and beyond, there is absolutely no excuse for poor content. There is a plethora of data available to us from all different walks of life. We can generate as much data to create fantastic content. By taking the various data sources, we can compile that and then create something that is new, unique, informative, engaging, vibrant, so that people do engage with the content we are creating. One thing that's clear to understand and to make a difference between is content strategy and content marketing. The strategy is the research and the planning phase. It's understanding what is going to work, what you're going to produce, how are you going to measure the impact of that. Content marketing is ensuring that you do take a multi-channel approach and that you create content across the right platforms resonating with the right audiences. A key aspect is understanding that your content strategy never ends. The content lifecycle is continual. You can't strategize and plan and then just go and create and promote. You have to take the learnings from everything that you do, understand what's working, what's not working. What could you change and what can you iterate on in order to make the next piece of content even stronger to deliver even more results for you. It's also important to understand that when we use the word content, we don't just mean words on a page. Content is an all-encompassing term now for what will work with your audience. Is video the right type of content that should be produced and people will want to engage with? Is it tools that can allow people to monitor something a little bit more clearly? Will animation, will apps, will infographics, will they work? What are you doing on a social media perspective? Are you utilizing the likes of Twitter or Facebook or Pinterest, and how are you sharing across those platforms? How are any of the pieces of content that you create being used, interacted with on mobile devices? It's imperative that you put mobile at the heart of your strategy now and going forward. Mobile traffic is increasing significantly and is now incorporating about 50% and growing of the majority of people's traffic. A lot of people will use mobile as a first touch point, and they will conduct searches at various points during the day, and then they will revisit that site from a desktop environment later on in the day or in the evening to possibly conclude the initial piece of business that they were looking for. So at this point, what I'd like to do is hand you over to Julie, who will talk a little bit more about the audiences and the direct impact within pharma.
Thanks, Barry. We've heard a lot about the importance of content strategy, and I think one of the key things as a start point to thinking about this content strategy is really, as in all things marketing, is starting with the audience, starting with who it is that we're trying to connect with. Now, of course, for pharma, this is some waters that have been muddied over recent years. It used to be nice and simple. We used to be able to talk to prescribers and our job was done. Whereas, of course, now we've got lots and lots of multi-layered audiences that we're engaging with, from prescribers through to nurse prescribers, through to GPs, through to patients, end users, and obviously carers are increasingly important. With the advent of patient empowerment, it's just much more important that we engage with all of these different audiences. Now, of course, from a content strategy point of view, when we're starting to think about who we talk to, then obviously all of these audiences have got different agendas, they have different needs, different things are relevant to them in different ways. There are different messages that we need to start to get out. So, it's a complex sort of set of considerations that we need to start to engage with in thinking about how we construct this content strategy in order that we are found for the right things by the right people. So it's not just about that audience as well. The other thing that we need to think about is that there are different messages that are around at different times. So if we start to think about a typical patient journey for somebody with a chronic condition, for example, then at the point of diagnosis, they have some specific information needs. It's really, what's going on with me? What are these symptoms all about? What can I potentially do about it? You're in a state of intense learning about, the condition that that has newly come through into your life. High degree of information need, high degree of searching that's going to be going on around all of these issues about diagnosis, symptom and initial condition. Once somebody then progresses through to the initial stages of sort of coping with their condition, of starting treatment, then those needs sort of start to subtly change. It could be that they're starting to think about, right, okay, I may have been prescribed X, Y, and Z. I need to find out a little bit more about some of these treatments. I need to be thinking about sort of holistic treatments. What else can I do? What other support is there? And then finally going through onto, once you are settled down, you know what's going on, you know the form, then living with the condition, again your needs change. And thinking about that search, I no longer necessarily need to be given, information all about eczema or information all about rheumatoid arthritis. I sort of get that bit. What I'm now interested in is potentially sort of changes that may be happening to me. What's happening as time goes on? Is there anything new on the horizon that's coming through that might impact on my journey? What support is out there? It may well be that I'll be starting to look for forums to find out other people's experiences. It may well be about sort of lifestyle issues. It may also be that compliance sort of issues come in and adherence issues come into this thing. We know that adherence falls off a cliff around about 3 months after initial diagnosis. And again, content can start to sort of think about how we can address and how we can support that. So different searches, different information needs different impact on the content strategy and the way in which we can start to interact with Google Hummingbird. And it's no different really from when we're thinking about talking to HCPs. For example, for a typical GP, you may well have a situation where you've never actually prescribed a certain drug or it's due. Again, very, very information hungry at this point. What does it do? What are the indications for it? What are the contraindications? How does it work? And so on and so forth. You need all of that information about sort of prescribing guidelines and so on. That could be it then. We go along quite happily, but it may well be that you then end up with a patient comes through who's having an issue with a specific medication. Then your search needs may well change. It could well be about what's happening with the side effects for this. It could well be that you start to look at sort of more deeply into contraindications and so on. And then as you go on in life, as the drug becomes sort of more established, as you become more familiar with the prescribing, what you're needing to do to prescribe the drug, you're more familiar with it, then again your needs may change and our thoughts about what we're showing that GP will also change. So for example, again, changes in terms of what's new and what's on the market. It could well be that a competitor comes along with a different product that's out there, in which case we might need to sort of start cross-selling. We might need to start sort of getting different information out there. So again, your search patterns are going to change according to the stage at which the GP is at in terms of his relationship with your brand and your product. So there's lots and lots of differences in terms of search habits, not just by audience, but also in the stage of the journey that that audience is in terms of its relationship with your brand. The other thing, of course, that we have to think about is semantic differences. You know, it may well be that the two audiences are after pretty much the same information, but the way in which they'll try and access it is different. So, for example, HCP may well be using terms like osteoarthritis, whereas somebody, a patient or carer, might be talking more in terms of you know, the common language such as swollen wrists or so on. So again, in thinking about, you know, as Barry was talking about those sorts of conversational searches, we also need to think about not just those conversational searches, but also the type of language that's going to be used according to these different audiences. There's a lot in this, so how the hell do we find out what these individual audience needs are? Well, of course, it's all about listening. And, you know, there are ways of approaching this. We can talk to patients, we can talk to carers, we can talk to HCPs and the old traditional ways of doing nice traditional focus groups and research. But of course, we've now got this resource that's out there of all of the chatter, all of the forums, all of the information that's there on the web. And, you know, there are different ways of engaging with audiences, but lots and lots of tools that are out there, both old-fashioned and bang up to date, that will give you this information that we need that allow us to understand what patients' needs are, how they're interacting with you and your brand, how they're interacting with the competition, how they're understanding and talking about and finding out about their condition. Now, as always, the problem with an awful lot of information is that it can be overwhelming. It can end up just being about noise. How the hell do we start to filter through all of this noise, all of these conversations, and actually get to something which is an actionable insight, which is something that we can say, right, this is the gold dust, this is the knowledge that we need. Well, unfortunately, there isn't really an easy way of doing this. There are tools in which we can that you can start to use, particularly online, and Barry's going to come on and talk about some of these that will allow us to understand and pinpoint, you know, the prioritization of conversations, what people are talking about more rather than less. But really speaking, what you do need is you need somebody within your organization that's all over this, that really, really loves it and understands it and is able to sort of go through and do the sort of analysis that will allow us to actually understand what's going on. Because, of course, this isn't just a one-time thing. These conversations will change according to time. You can't just sort of say, right, okay, we've done our customer listening now, we've ticked that box, we can go on and we don't need to touch it again until we do a product review or a brand review in 2-3 years' time. This has to be something which is a continuous process. So that understanding of the customer, of what the customer needs are, of how those needs differ according to audience and according to stage in the journey, are all things that you need to really, really have a great understanding of in terms of developing your content strategy. The other key platform to this is actually thinking about, what does success look like to you? I'm sure we're all familiar. There's been sort of a rush, particularly to patient websites. This has sort of been the interesting thing. Lots and lots of pharma companies have, in recent years, thought, great, we'll have to have a patient website, and suddenly lots and lots of patient websites are out there, and then there they stay in this sort of state of hiatus in some ways, without really, from an outside perspective, being clear about what they're there for, what are they trying to do. And I think this is crucial, really, to start to think about your digital presence. You know, yes, we can talk about being found, but once you're found, what's it for? What are you trying to achieve? Now, of course, if you're in Amazon, it's dead easy, because it could well be about, you know, we can measure it by sales. For us within pharma, it's not really about sales, it's not even about likes. So there's lots and lots of other things that we can start to think about. You know, are we looking at loyalty? Are we looking at sort of people coming back to us time and time again? Are we looking at expressions of loyalty? A good one, really, when we're starting to think about our Google presence is, have we got authority? If people are, you know, searching around the terms around rheumatoid arthritis, are we coming up as being an authority on that condition? Because, you know, that is something which is very, very measurable, and, you know, could well be a crucial thing for us to actually be looking at as a KPI. Is it about patient interaction? Is it about degrees of engagement that people have with your online and digital presence? Or indeed, can you start to link through and think about other offline indicators that can start to, tie all of your marketing activity up into one. So from a content strategy point of view, yes, of course, it's all about content, but the start point from this is the understanding of who that audience is and what their needs are. And then again, from our perspective, what are we trying to achieve with that we can go out there and measure? Now, I think Barry's going to talk a little bit more about some of the tools that are inherent in being able to engage with that.
It's imperative that you go through the planning and the research stage to understand where you are and where you want to get to and how you're going to get there. Understanding the audience and how you will engage with them. And as we've been talking about with Hummingbird and relating that directly to search queries, as Jules was talking about the information changing in the process, it's important to understand what other aspects of your digital marketing strategy are you using. Are you using any social media to communicate with that audience to convey those types of changes? Do you have an email marketing strategy in order to put that information in front of HCPs at any time when it could be considered critical? Understand how all these components play into the overall part of your digital marketing strategy. So yeah, there's a number of tools that can help us, whether that's the listening aspect for understanding some of the conversations and the language that's being used within the social media sphere. There are tools to help us create content, to plan content, to promote content. So this part of the webinar is just to give you a feel for some of the tools that are available, that if you decide to do this yourself in-house and you don't decide to engage an agency, then these tools may help you your journey a little bit more smoother in trying to create it. So for example, Trello is a nice little tool for project managing your content creation process, and Storybird for creating your outline stories, getting buy-in from different parts of people who are going to be involved, and then putting that story to fruition and starting to produce that. Great content has great structure. We've already spoken about elements of the page which can be marked up to allow the search engines to interact with it in a more structured way. And from a user experience as well, we really should be thinking about how the user is interacting with the page. Time on page is one aspect that we can use. Again, if you're using your Google Analytics, you can look at the bounce rate on specific pages, and you can start to look at any split testing. So by utilising various pieces of information that's available, you can make changes to your pages, and from those changes, if you see, for example, a significant increase on the average time spent on a page, you know that that content is being engaged with by the user in a much more structured and much more useful way. So we want to try and listen to some of those conversations that's going on and understand some of the language that's being used and the phrases that people are using. Who are the influencers who may help us target our audience in a more structured way. So for example, I'm not going to go through all of these, but this is just to give you a flavour. SEMrush, for example, will allow you to take your website or any competitor's website and understand what phrases is that site being found for. Another little nice addition to that is if that site is using any paid advertising, then it will pull back the ads that are rendering for their PPC campaigns and give you an indication of the spend that they may be put into that type of campaign. If you want to understand really what's going on in the social sphere, then a tool like Bottlenose allows you to listen to some of those conversations and segment, and then you can start to put some sentiment analysis on top of that. If you're struggling to understand the phrases that may be useful to you and your audience, then Ubersuggest as a tool allows you to take what's being populated within the search box by Google and give you those related type searches. And then lastly, FollowerWonk. A tool like FollowerWonk allows you to understand the influence from a social perspective so that you can start to see who are the people who are having the most important conversations, who are the people that you should be trying to engage with, so that they can start to help you put your message out to a wider sphere. And then going back, as Joe said, it's all about the listening. There's so much information happening on a daily basis, billions of conversations. You need to actually get through that noise, understand what's important. This goes back to understanding what your success looks like. what are the metrics that you're going to be measured against? How can you separate the wheat from the chaff and understand the important information that you need to know and the other information that's nice to know but not imperative for you to act upon immediately. By distilling all that information down, by utilising all of those conversations, you get to a point where you've got some interesting data either to directly impact with or to create some content. So if you start to create it, how can you do that? Well, you can use, again, Storybird, for example, or Dipity, or depending on the type of information that you want to show people, you can start to use Google's charts, for example, or iCharts, where you can start to present your data in a very interesting and informative way so that people engage with the data rather than just being presented as something that's meaningless. It's all about the right content to the right person at the right time and, importantly, on the right device. So, I hope that you've found this webinar useful. If you have any questions or any queries at all, then foundryhealthcare.co.uk, our website, and all our contact details on there. Alternatively, you can find us on LinkedIn or on Twitter. And if you want to have a conversation about search, about digital marketing, about Hummingbird, about any aspect of it, we'd be delighted to hear from you. Thank you very much.